This video is going to pick up right where the last one left off, so if you haven't already watched part 1 of this series, you're probably going to want to do so now, otherwise this isn't going to make much sense. So we left off having just examined Aristotle's idea of what constitutes a tragedy, and I'm going to put that definition up again so you can read over it to refresh your memory. Basically, he argues that there are several distinct elements in a proper tragedy, and that all of these elements have their place on stage and have a specific function. Before we get into these elements, let's quickly put up 2 more qualifications that Aristotle has for a tragedy. The first is that it should be contained in, quote, one revolution of the sun, or one day. This concept actually hung around for a long time in drama. One of the reasons that Shakespeare's work is considered so groundbreaking, besides his awesome gift for language, is that he frequently and deliberately broke this rule which other playwrights of the time still followed. The second qualification is that tragedy should not be about people who are morally superior or inferior to the common person. That it should be about people of normal morality who have something terrible happen to them not because of wickedness or ambition or vice, but rather because of some terrible mistake. Okay, so let's talk definitions. Aristotle divides tragedy into 6 parts, with 3 additional concepts that arise from these 6. The first 2 are mythos and ethos, Greek for plot and character. These definitions haven't changed much in the subsequent millennia, so we're simply going to note that they refer to what and whom the play is about. The next 2 are dianoia and lexis. Dianoia refers to a character's thoughts or reasonings, and lexis refers to a character's speech or diction. Again, these are still standard fare in modern drama, so we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about them. The one thing I will point out is that lexis still refers to speech in verse, as opposed to the kind of dialogue that modern drama usually has. And we mentioned this verse speech in the last video. Also, dianoia refers to the reasonings that a character demonstrates through his or her speech, meaning that all reasoning in an Aristotelian play was open to the audience and a character's thoughts and motives were not concealed. The last 2 parts are opsis and melos, or spectacle and melody. This basically refers to props, costumes, etc., which is opsis, and the singing, instrument playing, etc., which is melos. It's important to remember that in Greek plays there was a chorus which was often on stage and would sing, dance, offer background information, and react to the events on stage, a kind of hybrid of both opsis and melos. Aristotle writes that melody is more important than spectacle, because spectacle is, quote, something enthralling but very artless and least particular to the art of poetic composition. The last 3 definitions we'll cover are the results of the interactions of the previous 6. The first is hamartia. In modern times we tend to define this as a tragic flaw, and conclude that a character's downfall was due to this flaw. In the Aristotelian sense, though, hamartia was more closely defined as an unfortunate mistake, one that was usually made by a character who had noble intentions. Their decision has unforeseen consequences that doom either themselves or others to whatever tragic end. The second is peripeteia, or reversal, which occurs when a character's actions have the opposite of the intended effect. Similar to a hamartia, a reversal occurs when a character wants to achieve one thing but ends up bringing about a different thing. The difference is that in a hamartia, a character's action has consequences outside the scope of the original intent. For example, a character might decide to banish his niece, which leads to the death of his wife and son, as happens in Antigone. This is hamartia. Whereas a messenger who tries to bring his king delight at the news that his mother still lives instead terrifies said king. This is a reversal, such as we find in Oedipus. The last definition we'll talk about today is Anagnorisis, or recognition, when a character moves from ignorance to knowledge. Aristotle argues that in the best dramas this recognition occurs at the same time as a reversal. As happens in Oedipus when the messenger we referenced above clues Oedipus into the fact that he may have already fulfilled the prophecy he's been running from his entire life. The Poetics goes on for a while after this about grammar and proper naming rules and lots of other stuff that I'm not going to go into now for the sake of time. And besides, we have to finally answer the question asked at the end of the last video. If all this stuff is supposed to lead us to a catharsis, as Aristotle argues it should in his definition of tragedy, what the heck does he mean by a catharsis? And now you will all be disappointed, because nowhere in the Poetics does Aristotle actually define catharsis, which is weird because it's kind of the main idea of the whole thing. He argues that tragedy is good and necessary and should be studied because it brings about catharsis, but he doesn't tell us what catharsis is. Scholars generally believe that Aristotle was using catharsis as a metaphor for the purging of emotions from the body, in the same way that he used the word to describe the purging of various fluids from the body in some of his writings on medicine. And while the exact definition varies depending on your source, most people agree that catharsis, both then and now, refers to the removal or purification of some emotion that you had within you that through the viewing of tragedy and the emotional outlet it gives has been cleansed from your soul, leaving you a more emotionally stable, more balanced person as a result. This is an interesting argument in today's world of on-demand entertainment. Do films and TV shows offer us a way to get rid of excess emotional feeling? And if so, are we better or worse off for using it? What about video games? Is the satisfaction we get from these healthy or unhealthy? Or is there a line somewhere that we have to learn not to cross? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I hope this was both useful and interesting. Cheers!